Chapter 10. Supply and Distribution During the Civil War. In connection with the difficult state of industry, destroyed by years of war, limited material resources, and the fierce class struggle, it became necessary to strictly centralize the distribution. Only in this way was it possible to achieve the necessary mobilization of all the forces and means for the successful accomplishment of military tasks and deprive the class enemies of an economic base. The situation of the Soviet Republic at the end of 1918 was extremely difficult. There was not enough bread. There was not enough meat. Hunger tormented the workers. The workers of Moscow and Petrograd were given a bread octopus for 2 days. There were days when they did not give out bread at all. The factories did not work, or almost did not work. There was not enough raw materials, fuel. But the working class did not lose heart. The Bolshevik Party did not lose heart. The incredible difficulties of this period and the desperate struggle with them have shown what inexhaustible energy lurks in the working class and to what extent the power of the authority of the Bolshevik Party is immeasurable. History of the CPSU, B. Short Course, p. 218. The struggle against hunger required the heroic efforts of the working class and its party, and placed enormous organizational tasks. The task of centralizing accounting and distribution required the restructuring of all economic supply bodies, state and cooperative. This centralization turned out to be quite feasible, since in the hands of the Soviet state, even at the beginning of the Civil War, there were all the decisive branches of the national economy: industry, transport, all kinds of blanks. Under the decree of the Council of People's Commissars of November 21, 1918, the People's Commissariat of Food, Narkomprod, was assigned to the population. Nationalization of domestic trade was declared. The task of the People's Commissariat of Food included the procurement of all products serving for personal consumption and household. According to the decree, the People's Commissariat of Food received from the Supreme Council of the National Economy, VSNKH, all products of industrial production for distribution according to special plans for supplying the army and the population. All other institutions and organizations after the publication of this decree were deprived of the right to interfere in the business of distribution and distribution of products, except for the Supreme Council of National Economy, which had the right to dispose of funds specially intended for the supply of the Red Army. The People's Commissariat of Food has received the monopoly right of requisition and confiscation of warehouses and commercial premises in the center and on the ground. All goods requisitioned by any organization were subject to registration with the bodies of the People's Commissariat of Food. Glavprodukt, Narkomprod administration was directly responsible for the distribution of products. The use plans envisage exports, creation of a reserve, industrial consumption and products to be distributed among the population. The plan specified the price of the factory, wholesale and retail. Non-monopolized products were procured by the People's Commissariat of Trade through procurement and regulatory centers with the involvement of cooperation in this work. It was necessary to create its own distribution apparatus in place of the still existing private capitalist trading system. The practical task of creating a distribution system required the nationalization of trade, replacing it with state cooperative trade. Centralization in the hands of the state of the entire procurement, supply and distribution of food and necessities required a colossal distribution system. Its creation was possible only with the most active participation of workers, the rural poor, the middle peasantry through consumer cooperation. The cooperation under the dictatorship of the proletariat acquires a new meaning, it acquires a new role. Under capitalism, as Lenin pointed out, cooperation develops along the capitalist path, and the party's attitude to it could not be different from that of a mercantile organization. Therefore, it was absolutely legitimate to criticize those socialists who dreamed of overcoming capitalism with the help of cooperation, to free the workers from exploitation. Under the dictatorship of the proletariat, it would be the greatest mistake to continue to treat cooperation as a mercantile and to refuse to use it for the purposes of socialist construction. The cooperation of the population in the population was the program point of Lenin's economic policy. At the end of 1917, Lenin drafted a decree on consumer communes. In it, new principles of the organization of supply and distribution were stated. In late 1918 and early 1919, Lenin again returned to the program he had planned. In February 1919 he wrote, "The question recently discussed in the Council of People's Commissars on Cooperatives and Consumer Communes puts on the turn, as the most important, the measures of transition from bourgeois cooperation to the Communist Consumer Productive Association of the whole population." Lenin Collection, p. 290. The decree of the Council of People's Commissars of March 16, 1919, on consumer committees developed further the task of creating a single distribution apparatus, which Lenin had planned. According to the decree, in all urban and rural areas, consumer cooperatives merged and reorganized into a single distribution body, the consumer commune. The consumer community included the entire population of the area. Every citizen was assigned to one or another distribution point. The commune was built on the basis of the initiative of the population. Management was carried out on a democratic basis, in accordance with the constitution of the RSFSR. The consumer communes were united in district, provincial unions and headed in the center, the Central Union of Consumer Communes, Centrosoyoids. Local food authorities transferred the entire distribution business of products and essentials to consumer communes. Thus, cooperation has become a single distribution body in the country, working on the basis of state distribution plans, on tasks and under the supervision of the relevant food authorities. The rights of procurement, which were previously provided to consumers' cooperatives, were transferred to consumer communes. Centralization of supply and distribution of products has led to the fact that private trade was almost completely banned. Open market ties were closed. The creation of a unified state system centralizing all procuring and distributing functions was completed in 1920. By that time, industry and trade had been completely nationalized. The Supreme Council of the National Economy, through its central offices and centers, was the sole planning and regulating body for all industrial production and the monopoly producer of products. The People's Commissariat for Food was the only state body directly responsible for the procurement and distribution business in the country, in the center and in the localities. The distribution apparatus, based on millions of consumers, was cooperation that fulfilled the state's tasks of directly distributing products to the people's environment. The distribution system, characteristic of military communism, was temporary. Under specific conditions of civil war and economic disruption, the military communist distribution system justified itself. It was a powerful blow to private traded capital. True, the private traders' capital and speculation were not, and could not be, completely destroyed, because socialist relations in production had not yet been established everywhere. The military communist distribution system helped to create, feed, clothe and harness the Red Army, save the working class from starvation, and provide the country's defense needs against the invaders. The system of supply of the Red Army was finally formed by the summer of 1919. By the decree of the Council of People's Commissars of September 14, 1918, on the organization of supplying the army with foodstuffs, a central commission was established to streamline and correctly establish the supply of food and necessaries to the army. By decree of the Council of People's Commissars of November 2, 1918, the Extraordinary Commission on the Supply of the Red Army was created, to which all the functions of the commission that had been created earlier were transferred. Its tasks included the mobilization of military and non-military factories for work on defense, control over the work of military plants, Regulation and Control of Orders Abroad. Later, November 16, the decree of the Council of People's Commissars on strengthening Red Army supply at the front with essential items was issued, to which at the front and in the front line organized basic warehouses, mobile and stationary benches, bakeries, etc. Under the decree of the All-Russian Central Executive Committee of July 8, 1919, all the agencies that were supplying the Red Army central, local and front were subordinated to the Extraordinary Commissioner of the Defense Council. In fact, Chososnabarm was a special apparatus of the Defense Council, whose chairman was Lenin. In August 1919, the decree of the All-Russian Central Executive Committee, on combining the supply of food for the Red Army with food products, transferred the entire supply business to the People's Commissariat of Food. As part of the latter, the main directorate for the supply of the Red Army, Glavsnoproderm, was established. The previously independent Central Commission for the Food Supply of the Army, Psychoproderm, was abolished. Her apparatus in the center and in the field moved to the People's Commissariat of Food. By decree of the Council of People's Commissars of August 22, 1919, Chososnabarm was given the right to appoint loans on temporary cash outlays, to move credits from paragraph to paragraph. A special billion fund was put at the disposal of Chososnabarm. A special budget commission was created to deal with financial issues. Thus, at the disposal of the Chososnabarm, the organizational functions, the disposition of credits, the supreme control over the supply of the Red Army and the work of all the bodies relevant to this case were concentrated. The procurement of the supplies of the economic supplies of the Red Army was concentrated in the Central Department of Military Preparations of the Supreme Council of National Economy, ZOVZ. The Red Army was in the period of the Civil War the main consumer. As the units of the Red Army were being formed, the number of persons who were to be supplied in the first place increased with each month. The need for priority supplies to the Red Army, with limited supplies of food and industrial items, forced the Soviet government to reduce the consumption of the population to its lowest level. For many types of products, the Red Army needed more than half of the resources at the disposal of the state. The limited availability of food supplies and industrial production necessitated strict control and regulation of consumption in the country. Initially, this rationing was expressed in the establishment of a system of class rations with the division of consumers into 4 categories. In 1919 and in the 1920s, significant changes were made to this system. The supply of workers' factories of great importance, as well as workers engaged in the preparation of fuel, firewood, peat, was allocated to a special group, Predafazstop. This principle of isolating shock enterprises proved itself in 1919, when the satisfactory supply of workers engaged in peat extraction provided a 100% fulfillment of the plan. By January 1, 1919, 4,053,000 people were on the supply of Predafazstop, and by January 1, 1920, there were 7,835,000 people. This number includes factory workers and their families, 4,610,000 people, construction workers of the Committee of State Structures, 58,000 people, workers of mail and telegraph, 202,000 people, workers of Soviet farms, 211,000 people, handicraftsmen, 220,000 people, etc. In addition, Predafazstop was supplied with seasonal workers Glavtorfa, 100,000 people, and about 1 million seasonal workers Glavskoma, 3 years of fighting hunger, pages 70, 71.